She's a clever girl. And 𝐊𝐲𝐬𝐧𝐷 werewolf. 46 heated. The air draped over her like a heavy weight. It clambered over her muscles, causing them to remain immobile despite the serious eyes that watched over her like a hawk. Sitting before her, the worm-man remained deathly calm, still as a statue as he waited. His legs were crossed on the bed, his arms in similar manner, and she had to admit they were distracting her the tiniest bit because he recently took his shirt off, so his upper body was completely exposed for her perusal. "Do it," Sebastian insisted, nodding towards her phone in between them. She thought he'd get over the voicemail after an hour of cuddling, but it seemed he had other plans. For here they were, him still waiting for her to call Theo and accept meeting up with him. Oh, and Sebastian was invited. How would she present that to him? Theo was a sweet friend whom she'd much rather explain the change of events in private without Sebastian's prying ears. She knew the OS flirtatious personality would only irk him even further. Why did he want to listen? Massey mentally prepared herself for the conversation. She had to be careful of not using any endearing terms. She had a habit of doing that with others, and she couldn't afford to let one sweet term slip at this moment. This was like speaking to Noah. At least he was Sebastian's pack mate, so he trusted him with her. Theo was a whole other ball game, and she allowed him to suck her blood. This can blow up very ugly. Fine, I'll call him myself, Sebastian decided. Reaching for her phone, Massey snatched the device before he followed through. Knowing him, he was kidding. No, it. There really was no way around this. Taking a deep breath, she pointed to his contact. Can I just say that there are no emojis near his name, so obviously I wasn't into him. There aren't any near my name either, he responded. Such soreness dropped in every syllable that it made her tongue curl. Massey felt at loss for words. Gosh, freaking horrible timing. You had them. I just took them off when we weren't talking. They'll go back, she promised. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeline Noble. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. I can do that right now. Sebastian clamped his hand over hers to hold her rapidly moving fingers. Later. Call your friend first. Yes, call her friend first. There went a failed attempt at stalling for more time. Why did the word friend have such a tone of warning attached to it? In the past few days when HED used that word with her detailing what friends do, it was said with lightness and an air of playfulness. There was no joking now. Okay, but I'm going to tell him you're listening in. He doesn't need to know. But I just think it's best if. Let me hear the man in his natural environment. But hell no if I'm using loudspeaker and I can hear without loudspeaker. Go ahead, Sebastian said. He tapped his right ear lightly and again Chess reminded yes, a werewolf and can use enhanced hearing as he so chooses. There's no point in holding off any longer. Taking a deep breath, she pressed the button to call Theo. As the phone rang, Marcy awkwardly turned in the bed so that Sebastian's intimidating expression was not staring her down. Well, if it isn't candy. You made my day with this phone call, sweet stuff. Mercy laughed. Theo, I had to call you back. Especially after that voicemail you left me. Yes, I figured expressing my annoying love for you would make you reply faster. Does this mean I'll get to see you soon? Mercy winced. Theo was so adorable, but it was time to set things straight. About that. You know how I went on a trip all sad about the guy who didn't like me. If by guy you mean the undeserving, unappreciates dog who. Well, him and I are actually together now. Mercy rushed, stopping him before he went on a spiel that would possibly have Sebastian react negatively. Thankfully, he seemed her golden. 𝐿 remained calm despite the obvious derogatory remark. Good. She heard a long sigh. I had a feeling that would happen. You're too cute to be pushed away for long candy. 𝐿𝐿𝐷 so adorable. Mercy gushed, smiling at his compliment. He truly was the cute one. Sebastian shifted and the temperature in the room suddenly dropped by 10 degrees. Massey cleared her throat nervously. It was obvious to her now that Sebastian was much concerned with what seeing, but rather have a reaction to it. So if you want to see me, Sebastian would have to come. I know that's super awkward, so I completely understand if you don't want to. Sure. That sounds fun. Wait. What? Massey stared at her phone. Did he just agree? What was wrong with these men? Theo. I said Sebastian is coming. I'm sure you don't want to meet him. She voiced, aiming to be direct. Of course I do, Candy. I want to see the man who beat me in your affections. Is he big and strong? I was told him kind of skinny. You know. Massey smacked her face. You have a very nice body, Theo. Trust me. That was not the issue. A low growl reached her ear, and Massey gazed at her worm and warily. She should have known better than to say that. I guess I'll see you this weekend. I'll text you some spots we can go to and you choose your preference. 𝐿𝐤𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐲𝐻𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐬𝐿. Theo voiced his agreement, and once things were set, Massey said her goodbyes, making sure they didn't sound excited to see him or too animated. Once the call ended, she sighed in relief. That went much better than she anticipated. She just wished Theo would be a normal guy and not accept meeting her with Sebastian. Now she had to go through the hassle of dealing with these two males. See, I did what you told me. Can we go back to cuddling now? Mercy asked, pulling his arm and bringing him deeper into the bed so they could be where they were before. It felt so nice to have his arms around her. She wanted more of his warmth, especially now that he was bare, chested with no shirt on. Sebastian remained unmoving to her pulse. It was like she was trying to move dry cement. It was then she realized his eyes were hard, and his lips were in a straight line. So, he started, his tone ice cold. What parts of his body did you find very nice? Sebastian quoted. Merce's mouth dropped. There's no way he was putting so much weight on that little comment. Sebby, please. I just said a basic answer. It's not like I was drooling over his body or anything. A chest all in good looking. It's a simple observation. So you liked it? Sebastian accused, his eyes narrowing ever so slightly. No, the only body I'd is yours. Seeing as he was grumpy and wouldn't come to her, Massey went to him instead. She sat over his crossed legs and began to kiss him. He turned his cheek away from her the first time, but she squeezed his cheeks between her hands and forced him to face her. Stop. 𝐿𝐤𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐲𝐻𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐬. Being. 𝐿𝐤𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐲𝐻𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐬. 𝐿𝐤𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐲𝐻𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐽𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐬. 𝐿𝐤𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐲𝐻𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐾𝐬. Sebastian frowned, continuing to be unresponsive. I can't be upset with men if they like you. You're too wonderful. But I'm not happy when you like these other men. Massey groaned. He was definitely overreacting. I don't like him. What I said was not serious. Would you like it if I told Keisha she had a very nice body? Massey gasped in betrayal. You find her body nice. It's the bigger hips, isn't it? You like bigger boobs. Sebastian rolled his eyes, as though she weren't getting his point. It's a hypothetical question, woman. I wouldn't like it, Massey admitted, somewhat annoyed. Why did he have to turn the tables? I get your point. Either way, I don't care for Theo, only you. Massey wrapped her body around his. I want affection. Love me, Sebby. His stale face remained immovable, but his firm lips cracked the slightest bit upwards. Wow, look at you, Massey cooed, running her hands over his shoulders. So strong and fine-looking. She blinked her lashes up at him prettily, and he thawed even further. Massey rubbed her cheeks against his. I got myself the finest apple tree in the entire orchard. Trying to be poet. At this, Sebastian cracked a smile. She clung so tightly around him that when he stood from the bed she was still firmly attached to him. He pulled the shirt halfway over himself, unable to continue as her appendages were in the way. Sebastian pet her thighs. Come on. Where are we going? giving him a strange look as she hopped off. Then, she frowned. Are we not going to cuddle because you're still angry? No. We're going to your house so you can donate those dresses. Then, I'm going to buy you some new ones. Sebastian said decidedly. But I want to cuddle. Massey wind. She gazed at the bed with longing. It had felt so nice. I'm starting to feel heated. It's best we do other things to stay distracted. Massey let him gear out his room. 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻𝐼𝐬 Heartfelt thanks for your unfading 𝐀𝐥𝐻𝐧𝐑𝐞𝐝. She repeated. Sebastian kissed her neck, and she felt his sharp teeth. Yes, she couldn't argue with that. To the dresses it was. As extra as Massey typically liked to be when she went out, especially when it was on dinner date, she decided that for this particular occasion she would take the safer route by choosing an outfit that was more modest and subdued in appearance while still looking moderately cute. In dark jeans, a shimmering turquoise blouse, and short kitten heels, she looked pretty without appearing as though she put a lot of effort. She didn't even bother using makeup, deciding that curling her ends would suffice. Sebastian could not have the smallest inkling of doubt of her wanting to impress Theo. Knock. Are you ready? Sebastian inquired, his voice slightly muffled by the closed door. Seeing as it was the weekend, Sebastian had used the excuse of them going to see Theo as reason for her to sleep over his house yet, again despite her being here only a week ago for Kristen's wedding. This room she slept in was a guest room, but it was starting to look more like her room. Her imprints were undeniable. She started leaving extra sets of clothes here for the random days she would stay over late and end up staying even on school days. Yes, we can go now. Massey fluffed her hair one last bit to a volume. Sebastian leaned against the open door, wearing regular jeans and a black shirt. Obviously, he couldn't be bothered. He blinked slowly, assessing her from head to toe. It was unnerving, and he was spending too much time drinking her in. Did he approve of the outfit or not? 𝐿, let's go. He closed his hand around hers, bringing it to his lips to kiss it. The ride to the restaurant was spent in companionable silence. Sebastian appeared not the least bit worried, but Massey grew more and more apprehensive the closer they drove to the place. Why did they have to do this? It seemed so pointless. The sleek, silver, toned glass doors of the restaurant were tall and impressive. As Sebastian grasped the golden handle to let her in first, Massey stared around her amazed. The entire roof of this place was decorated with beautiful drawings of angels fighting against demons. In one story, the angels would use music to dispel them away. In others, the demons were defeated through gruesome battles. Of the restaurant list she had sent Theo, he picked none of them, settling for this spot he found online with great reviews. At the time she informed Sebastian, he had shrugged, easy agreeing despite the further drive. From what she'd seen so far, this place was great. Sebastian took the lead once the hostess went up to them. Even in his plain clothing, the girl's eyes streamed over him in awe, as though he were one of the very angelic beings in the ceiling. She was so flustered with Sebastian that he had to start a job for her. We have a reservation with Theo. Oh yes, she blubbered, coming out of her reverie. Right this way, sir. Fanning her lashes at him, Sebastian stared right past her and scanned the area for the vampire. Massey gave her the evil eye. She had half mind to pull Sebastian down and kiss him in front of her. Why is it only he was addressed and not her? The table they were led to was a secluded one, and judging by the well-dressed, wined, drinking, blue-eyed vampire sitting there, it appeared Theo had arrived first. The hostess excused herself, seeming rather disappointed she wouldn't get to admire the two handsome men from her post at the front. Hey, Theo. Massey smiled warmly at her vacation friend, bringing him into a light hug. Just as pretty as I remember Candy. Complimenting her as usual. When they separated, his orbs went to Sebastian. The vampire held his hand out. The two were very distinct contrast to each other, as Theo was wearing a whole suit and tie, looking every bit the businessman. He looked well, put together and pristine compared to the raw warrior that was Sebastian. Sebastian stared at the hand offered to him. In flashing speed, their bodies blurred and Theo ended pressed against the wall with a threatening hand on his neck. Bite her again, and I'll kill you. Rather than appear afraid. The OS eyes shine with child, like excitement. A true big, bad wolf. Your man is strong candy. I like him. He held his hands up in surrender. I won't bite her again. Sebastian stared at him hard, as though assessing how genuine he was before letting go of him. Mercy felt like melting into the ground. This was so embarrassing. Thankfully, the restaurant was very packed, and from anyone's vantage point what occurred went in. She gave Sebastian a look that went pretty much ignored. The three settling into their seat. Theo first taking the time to fix his mussed-up shirt. He was more slender, as he had voiced of himself in the phone, but Marcy felt it suited him fine. Not everyone was like Sebastian, who trained with his packmates on a near-daily basis. A waiter approached their table. May I get you something to drink? Marcy settled for a nice sweet drink, whereas Sebastian muttered water was fine. Once the waiter was off, Theo began conversing. Since obviously you're off limits now, Candy, do you happen to have a sister? Theo inquired, resting his chin over his fingers. Marcy laughed. This was so typical of him. And funny thing was, she actually did have one. I do. But unfortunately she's taken too. Theo sighed in exasperation, swirling his wine cup with an air of dismay. You continue to break my heart, Candy. Trust me, you and my sister wouldn't work out much anyway. She's squeamish around blood and she's very strict. You guys are complete polar opposites. Marcy concluded. If Lydia went anywhere near Theo, she would probably go crazy. His overly teasing personality would drive her insane, and his gifting habits and generosity would place a sting on her eye. Can do it on my own persona. He would break everything she esteems. At distance. It's probably what Lydia needed anyway to stop being so hard-hearted. But she was currently trying a relationship with my cat to see if it'd work out. Theo was better off finding a more submissive woman. Oh, serious. Serious types make me want to bother them, Theo admitted, looking at the ceiling in thought. She'd hate me. Good call. The waiter released their drinks and took their orders for food. Theo of course picked a steak, detailing he wanted it as juicy and rare as possible. Sebastian was lazy. He didn't bother checking the menu and merely settled the waiter with a whatever she gets. Way to put the pressure. Now she was compelled to get something he would enjoy. In the end, Marcy settled for lamb chops. The sauce it came with sounded very tasty from the way the menu described it. Underneath the table, Marcy stepped on Sebastian's foot. The worm sighed before feasting Theo with a blank look. What do you do for a living? Theo tapped his fingers at the table and gazed at Sebastian with an amused expression. If anything, Theo just admitted he enjoyed bothering serious people. And Sebastian, well, he was exactly that type. Oh, you know, things here and there. How productive of you. Sebastian deadpanned. I know. It's a very difficult line of work. It's not for everyone. Why no? Theo breezed, shaking his head as though he were a man soared in with many burdens only he could handle. They're lucky to have you. You're one of a kind. Sebastian was so straight-faced it could be taken seriously or sarcastically. Marcy silently groaned at their exchange. This was a horrible idea. She knew it. What business did these two have seeing each other? They were both so stupid. Sebastian for making her agree to meet up with Theo, and Theo for approving in the midst of Sebastian joining. Marcy excused herself to go to the bathroom. She needed a break away from those two. She stalled for a few minutes, fixing her hair slightly, although it technically needed no prodding. When she returned, the food thankfully had been served. Oddly enough, once she sat at the table, Sebastian and Theo were actually conversing like normal men. Apparently they found common ground in regards to something about investing. Digging into her food, Marcy decided she'd happily stay out of that topic to not risk ruining their current flow. They were being cordial now. That's all she ever hoped for. Hours later, in the confines of the guest room, Marcy prepared herself to sleep. Dinner with Theo had not gone as bad as she expected. The two actually shook hands, and Sebastian very obviously whisked her away from the vampire mid-hug with a low murmur of "That's good enough," as though he were her personal hug meter that determined how well she could hug someone. On the drive home he had a pleasant smile on his face, and when Marcy had asked him about it he floored her by stating he had only come to make sure she didn't have any semblance of feeling for the man by smelling her reaction around him. To this moment, it flustered her to think men could extend their sense enough to detect arousal. A set of knocks interrupted her as she brushed her hair. "Come in. You should ask who it is first before you accept." Sebastian closed the door behind him. His voice was light, though they held deep warning to it. His golden eyes crawled up her bare legs, stopping at the hem of her cotton bottoms. He slinked his way to her, prowling around her like an invasive wolf. She was in the middle of detangling the third section of her hair when she felt his hands brush behind her knee, siding up her thighs. These bottoms are very short. Sounding distracted, his warm hand stopped under the hem, where his thumb whiskered underneath curiously. Massey felt her spine straighten. Her eyes met his in the mirror as hovered behind her. There was a dangerous glow to them that was darker. It was then he seemed to notice her shirt. From behind, it appeared normal as it covered all her back, but it was cut shorter in the front, exposing the bottom half of her stomach. As she had the room to herself, she didn't think it wrong to wear something so unconservative. The way his eyes were glowing made her very self-conscious of every inch of her skin. The other hand rose to her stomach. "It was a bad idea to visit you at this time of night." Massey spun to see him face. She smiled and kissed his lips wide. Sebastian emitted a low growl. "Be careful. To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilben. Heartfelt thanks for your unfading patience, enthusiasm." He warned. Marcy went on her tippy toes to hug him, pressing herself fully into him. He was solid mass against her, such a contrast to her soft form. Sebastian made a sound of a man being tortured. "And you're not wearing a bra," he breathed, closing his eyes. One moment, Marcy was quite content in the warmth of his embrace, and then the next she was on the plush surface of the bed. His lips crashed over hers, hot and full of heavy want. His tongue intermingled with hers. She could feel his passion pour over her like fine wine full of love that's been setting for a long time. With his leg he parted her thighs, placing himself in between them. His mouth lowered from her lips to her stomach, his tongue leaving a wet, fiery trail that made her back arch. He latched onto a particular spot and sucked, leaving her breathless, and his hands gripped her waist to him as she squirmed under his touch. He skimmed higher, his warm breath lavishing her with imprints wherever they trailed, until he reached her ribs, and slowly ascended until his nose touched the swell her breast. His hold on her tightened. "How many times have I told you showing your stomach is an offer of submission?" "One," Sebastian growled, pulling back with shaking hands. It seemed like it was taking all his strength to keep his hands away from her. Massey sat up to pull him back to her, but he stepped further away. Already knowing what was the problem, she sighed. "I'll put on clothes that cover me more. Then can we cuddle?" Sebastian grunted. "It's too late." Massey rolled her eyes. "Stop being over-dramatic. No, I'm being realistic. You women never seem to get it. I'm a dry forest when it comes to you. Any spark you give me will burn up." Massey giggled at his analogy. "Oh my gosh, you've been reading poetry books from James, haven't you?" His eyes narrowed as he stiffly went to the door. Massey made a noise of sadness and pouted. "I want to cuddle." "Ugh, this is all your fault. You made me like cuddling. It was all your idea." Sebastian looked like he was internally fighting with himself between going with her idea or staying away for both their benefits. In the end, he gave her a serious expression full of meaning and left the room without another word. She could already mentally hear all the things he was telling himself it wasn't appropriate. They weren't mated, and he wanted to do things right by her. Massey dove under her covers and stared appreciatively at the moon. It was full tonight. She never thought she'd be the type to say this, but she wouldn't mind marrying young, especially if it was to a man like him. The next day Sebastian went inside his father's study. His steps were purposeful and full of intention. The thoughts on his mind were going haywire. He wanted to make sure his decision wouldn't be considered foolhardy. "I wanted to speak to you in regards to something." His father's black eyes had been off the screen the moment he entered, calm and expectant, as though he expected him here. "Of course, Sebastian. What is it?" "It's been more difficult to be around Marcy." He went straight to the point. His father nodded. "Is that so? What kind of difficulties?" He took a sip from his customary morning coffee, one most likely loaded with sugar and cream. The sly smile he was trying to hide behind the mug made Sebastian annoyed. His father knew exactly what he was talking about. Yet he asked these unnecessary questions. Sebastian sighed. "I cannot contain," placing his coffee down. The smile on his father's lips were as sweet as his drink. He responded, sounding rather smug. "Well, there's only one solution for that problem." Sebastian nodded, happy with his father's approval. Indeed, there was only one solution. 47 proposal. Sebastian couldn't believe this was happening. Right now, with his parents, they seemed to have made it their mission to irk him to no end this morning. He should have processed better their reaction to his open honesty. His father gestured to him with his hand, giving meaningful eyes to his mother that easily transferred what was going on. "Sebastian here said he can no longer contain," Samuel said, repeating the exact words Sebastian had spoken to him mere minutes ago. His mother gave a sideways glance, as though that sentence alone were not enough for her. Figures shared one it plainly said, "Is that so?" Looking at Sebastian with sly eyes. "You can't contain what?" "Your excitement. Your happiness." Sebastian sighed. "The urges." She nodded in understanding. "Yes, we men have many urges. You like to run, and to spend time in the forest." His father snickered. Sebastian's fingers twitched at her fake obliviances. "You shouldn't be this resistant." Why was he playing into her game? "The urge you had with Dad." His mother smiled wider. "Before your father and I were romantically involved, I often had the urge to kill him. And in addition I want to mate her." Sebastian grunted, finally giving in to what she wanted. His mother immediately walked to him. Her sleeping robes flowed around her like the rising dawn. Looking like this, it reminded him of his childhood when she would put him to bed at night despite his insistence that he wasn't afraid of the dark. She patted his cheek affectionately. "You know, honey, I always thought you inherited the better side of the genes. You're handsome and hate spicy food. Just like Mommy." As his mother continued to drone about all the amazing attributes he so called inherited from her, he caught sight of his father doing something absolutely horrendous in the background. Sebastian's eyes wide and with horror. "Dad, that is so unnecessary." "What?" his father asked, looking innocent and devious at the same time. "I just want to make sure my son proposes properly." Samuel fixed a large human-sized teddy bear on the studier's chair. He even bothered to try crossing its legs in a typical female fashion, since the legs were too stubby and short. His attempt failed rather miserably. Sebastian could only massage his temples at the ludicrous ideas of his father. He turned to his only hope. "Mom, fix this," he demanded, rather than come to his aid. His mother giggled and clasped her hands together in excitement. "No way. I want to see this too," she enthused. Her curly hair, which he inherited from her himself, was out loose and spun around her wildly. She had been sleeping only moments ago, but had woken up once his father told her the news. Sebastian crossed his arms, his eyes narrowing to annoyed slits. "This is pointless." His mother's small hands went to his hair, combing it back as she placed a series of kisses on his cheek. Sebastian remained unmoving, his gaze fixed on the bookshelves that lined the wall in clear defiance. "Get up." Against his will, Sebastian stood to his feet and glared. His father chuckled. "Oops, did I do that?" His father massaged his shoulders from behind. "Go ahead, SEB. Make us proud. You've been carrying that ring in your pocket for some time now." Sebastian looked down to his jean pockets. It was true. The very day Marcy showed him the ring she liked, he bought it. She has been carrying it, wondering the right time to do it. No one noticed the interesting shape of his pocket, as the ring box was big, and could be mistaken for other nonsense people carry, except his father, who knew he never carried things in his pockets 24/7, not even his car keys and wallet. However, I will only do this foolishness once. His mother hopped in place, squeaking in excitement. Sebastian held in his amusement and decided he better get this over with. Marcy didn't consider herself to be the clingy type. She always saw herself as the sort that gave people space and watched over them, at least in her mind. However, this morning she couldn't help but continuously look at the entrance of the kitchen in hopes of spotting Sebastian come in for breakfast. He was there. She knew how her man was. He never showed up late. If anything, he should have been here before she was. It was disconcerting, to say the least. What on earth was Sebastian doing? I saw him enter Papasaur's study this morning. In case you're wondering, Jaden cleverly inserted after her saw her look at the entrance for what felt like the 100th time. Mercy smiled shamelessly. I was wondering where he was. Then, as though speaking of him out loud somehow summoned him, Sebastian FD entered the kitchen. There was an air of exasperation about him she couldn't quite place. Nonetheless, he softly kissed her cheek before going to serve himself. Noah munched on a buttered toast, his cheeks hued from all the stuffing he likes to do. Where's my kiss? He asked in between bites, poking fun at how Sebastian only bothered to acknowledge her. Sebastian's parents followed soon afterwards. Papasaur said a general greeting to everyone, but it seemed he was more focused on gearing his wife far away from where they were sitting. Mercy was surprised Mia was even awake. The woman loved to sleep in, especially on Saturdays. She was always guaranteed to be unavailable until noon. That it was 10 in the morning and she was wide awake, eyes full of glimmer and shine, was a complete surprise. Mercy smiled back at her when she sent her a quirky smile. It even looked like she was about to say something, but Papasaur squeezed her side and forced her to keep moving to the adult table further on. But not before Mia made some type of signal to her son, who rolled his eyes in vexation and gutted a goodness. Yes, Mum. Could they be more obvious? Jaden muttered. He sipped slowly from his glass of orange juice, looking ever the wise sage. Mercy always thought he must have been an old tortoise in his past lifetime. He took his time with everything. He didn't seem to grasp things before others did. His twin brother, Jordan, blinked at him with curious eyes. Obvious about what? He inquired, completely clueless of what was going on. Mercy wanted to know too. Yeah, about what? Rather than answer their questions, Jaden ignored them, pretending he didn't hear them at all. His attention remained focused on his plate of food, slowly cutting his pancake into symmetrical pieces. Impatient, Jordan shoved him with his shoulder, causing his knife to make a jagged cut. Jaden was not pleased. You ruined my pancake. Sounding rather piqued, he lifted the specific piece with the wrong cut. Noah's eyes shined. He forked him within 2 seconds and shoved it in his mouth. Still tastes good though. Jaden feasted his brother with a direct look. From her seating, it meant Jade and turned away from her. This would have been fine if Jaden said something out loud. Unfortunately, it seemed their twin telepathy was at play. For without a word, Jordan went from confused to shocked to excited. What the heck? The purple-eyed beauty was prepared to interrogate them, except Sebastian chose that exact time to sit next to her, which made her lose all care for whatever it was they were telepathically discussing. Now that she took her time looking at him, he cleaned up rather nicely this morning. Rather than sweats and shirts he enjoys wearing on weekends, he opted to wear dark jeans and the deep purple button-up she made him by the day they went shopping for new dresses. As the ones Theo had bought for her, he forced her to either donate or give to Lydia. Surprisingly enough, Lydia actually bothered to take them. Her sister's shorter height proved to be an advantage, as Lydia hated short things, so the dresses fit within the scope of her appropriateness scale. Mercy didn't mind. She may have given Lydia 3 expensive dresses, but Sebastian replaced them with 7 new ones that she could actually wear during this winter season. And no more grumpy Sebby. "You look nice this morning," Massey complimented, dropping a kiss on his cheek. Beneath the table, Sebastian let one of his hands rest on her thigh, his fingers pressed on it lightly as a way of thanks. With his other hand he began to eat. Yet it didn't pass by Massey that he seemed a little distracted. The food didn't hold much of his attention. As a matter of fact, when he finished, he didn't even bother to get seconds, which never happens, and there was a slight glitch to his movements that belied he was anxious about something. "Massey, help me do the dishes," Jaden requested, sounding more like an order than an option. He didn't bother waiting for her response. He stood with a group of dishes he gathered from their table and walked to the sink in an untroubled pace, while the others started heading to the living room. Massey went alongside Jaden. There was something about watching the grime slid off a plate that made washing dishes relaxing. Not long afterwards Haley joined them, and together the trio managed to wipe the kitchen clean in no time. Massey joined the others in the living room. It was full of pack members lazily enjoying a variety of activities. The young ones played cards and board games near the fireplace, and teenagers surrounded the large screen that hosted video games. The adults relegated themselves to casual talk, and those that were more quiet remained cozy up to the couch with a book in hand. All in all, the Dark Falls pack felt like home. Massey could see herself staying here forever. Her eyes surveyed over the people. But Sebastian was nowhere to be seen. Where was he now? It's like he kept disappearing. Something was bothering him and she wanted to confront him about it. A hand waved her over. It was Kristen Sebastianing for her to sit in the empty seat beside her. Massey had just sat and began conversing with Kristen when the air around her suddenly hushed considerably. Massey allowed her gaze to travel to the source of attention, only to realize that it was her, and the worm and currently coming to her. Sebastian's steps were purposeful. Massey tried to distinguish what he held so tightly in his hand, but his palm was so large it engulfed the object out of view. He took a short breath, his defined chest rising ever so slightly before their eyes locked. Never had his golden eyes been as vibrant as they were now. Those amber orbs so full of fire they magnetized her. And when he stopped in front of her and went on one knee, she had never felt so stupid. Massey blushed. Her heartbeat accelerated as his palm revealed a pretty black box. The box was nothing compared to the gorgeous, gleaming gem it held inside. To carry it just as she asked, with tiny purple stones circling it and winding at the side of the band. Massey turned back to Sebastian, whose cheeks were an uncharacteristic tinge of red that made his rough features appear more soft. "This woman requires another half. One to have, to provide for and always protect. Massey, I am in love with you. I offer myself to you wholly, and promise to cherish you all the days of my life. Will you be my mate?" His head lowered to her lap, the dark wisps of his hair brushing her dress, his free hand clasped to the back of her calf, almost pleading as he waited for her answer. Everyone watched, waiting with bated breath. The entire air seemed to still until at last it all caught up with Massey, who squealed in place. "Yes," Sebastian called back. The biggest smile shined on his face. He slid the ring on her finger and pulled her into a kiss. A whole series of 𝐊𝐲 and 𝐷𝐿 invaded her eardrums. Loud clapping rang all around her, with a series of yelling and whooping that included Nose and Jordan's particular rambunctiousness. Flash. Suddenly, flashes of bright light surrounded them. They were taking pictures. When they separated, Massey realized that their biggest fan was Sebastian's mother, who face high behind a professional camera wielded expertly in her small fingers. "Bunny, hurry, pick me up. I want to take it at a higher angle," Mia cried. Papasaurus was ready and lifted her with ease. She ushered her son. Another kiss 𝐶𝐸. Before she knew it, Massey was pulled into another sweet kiss, and more blinding lights surrounded her. Sebastian hugged her tightly to himself, holding her in the presence of his entire pack. He buried his face into her hair. He was still smiling, and his voice was elated. "I love you. 𝐊𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐿𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐿𝐻. 𝐿𝐿𝐲𝐿𝐬𝐷𝐞𝐫𝐬. Her heart warmed at the repetition. It traveled all the way to her toes. She felt as though she could soar. "I love you too, Sebi," she said adoringly. Mercy lifted her ringed finger in the direction of Maya's camera. Her grin so wide she felt her face would break. Good thing she wore a cute outfit this morning. It was a warm sweater dress that went wonderfully with 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿's shirt. Mia was all for it, especially as Mercy started making 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 go into specific poses. People swarmed them with rounds of congratulations to the newly engaged couple. Not once throughout people's felicitations and blessings did 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 let go of her. She was attached to him at the hip. Once the amount of people around them dwindled, he brought her over his lap on the couch. Mercy felt like a princess on the throne. "When do you plan for us to get married?" 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 sighed contentedly as he pulled her back against his chest. Mercy admired her ringed finger. It looked like it was designed exactly for her. The ring was prettier than the one she showed him online. "How fast?" 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 kissed her neck, his teeth sharpening every so slightly. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐫𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷. 1 year later. "Honey, why are you up so early?" 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 blinked the sleepiness away from his eyes. Sitting up from the bed, his hair was in disarray and his shirt completely crumpled. He had returned late last night from an assignment. All she had felt was her husband slide into the bed and breath her in before falling asleep. It's a wonder he was up right now, as the sun had yet to peek over the horizon this early in the morning. Mercy went to his side, unable to stay so far away when he was looking so adorably clueless. "Kristen and I have to look over the accounts of the diner. A truck is coming into ours and we have to make sure our inventory is correct." 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 grabbed her hand and laced their fingers together. "Oh, well, before you leave, can you help me with something?" "Sure, what is it?" The hand they had joined together he led under the covers on top of a very awake and alert member. Mercy blushed. 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 brought her into a kiss. "I'll take that as a yes." 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐫𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷. Mercy really had to go, but his deep voice and that morning tone was doing things to her. "You better make this quick," he hummed, a nondescript thought that rolled over her like a caress. "I don't make promises I can't keep." Mercy checked something off on her calendar and analyzed the 3-month data. She knew it. 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 was being a sneaky little husband, and she did not appreciate him meddling into things that were naturally. 𝐿𝐤𝐷𝐞𝐫𝐬. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐷. She had passed it off as him going through a cycling man, period. Surely, men were not animals who wanted to have sex all the time. But it was just strange that he always chose a specific time of the month to not have sex with her. And he also tended to scatter his assignments, particularly the ones that required him flying out into other states in that period. The times he wasn't required to fly out, he would be a twitching mess on the bed, and would state he was heavily tired despite the fact that Mercy knew he was primed and ready to go. It makes a woman question why it is her man won't have sex with her. Did she exude a weird smell during that time? What was it? It took a period app to let her know that 𝐨𝐥𝐻𝐿 avoided having sex with her the time she ovulated. In essence, he stayed away from her when she was fertile to avoid getting her pregnant. She knew he was concerned about her having a difficult pregnancy, but this was too much. Today was her day of ovulation, and sure enough she already saw the extra measures he took this morning by waking up earlier than her and heading to work. It was just her luck there were no out-of-state assignments, so he was forced to sleep with her tonight. She would make sure 𝐻𝐸D make love to her, or confront him about his unnecessary concerns. By the time it was midnight, Mercy was prepped, waiting for him in a silky one-piece that went obscenely high. The fabric so thin it was slightly sheer. They typically wore comfortable things to bed, but today was worth placing extra effort. She shook her hair out of her bun, letting it fall into messy waves around her. Then, it was time to wait. It wasn't until 2 in the morning that he entered their room. Mercy made sure to have all the lights off and pretend to be asleep, Sebastian was unearthly quiet as he prepped for bed, making near no noise in everything he did. To my 𝐿𝐻𝐼𝐧𝐼𝐬 𝐊𝐢𝐳 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐬𝐭𝐢𝐴ᐐ𝐻𝐼𝐬 Mercy called out to him, and she heard something that sounded like a curse. "Sonny, why aren't you asleep?" He had been in the middle of putting on a shirt, something he almost never did. He preferred sleeping shirtless with only sweatpants. "Leave that shirt there and come to bed." Her husband obediently left the shirt in place and climbed onto the mattress. He strategically placed himself exactly a few inches away from her, enough for her to not question why he was close. "Aren't you going to come under the covers?" Mercy inquired. He had his arms crossed behind his head and was out in the air. "No, I don't feel cold," he responded lightly, avoiding her gaze. Deciding she was done playing nice, Mercy frisked away the sheets that covered her. Like a magnet, his eyes snapped to her, taking all of her in. "I'm tired tonight, honey." His tone was leveled and monotonous, but his eyes told a whole different story. They watched her every curve as she closed their distance and straddled him. "I missed you today," she murmured, running her hands up the rows of his abdomen. Sebastian growled, but it sounded more like he was restraining himself rather than feeling angry. "Mercy, not in the mood tonight." Luck was against him, for the angle of their window allowed the light of the moon to penetrate in a slant that hid a coarser part of his face. He did not look like a Werner not in the mood. He looked positively feral, and his hands were doing that thing again, where he would begin to grab her possessive lie and then let go suddenly, before getting hold of her again. Mercy crossed her arms. She noted that the moment her fingers detached from him, his lips slightly in disappointment. He wanted her. She could tell. "I know what you're doing. I've been watching you for 3 months and you're trying to avoid getting me pregnant. You don't want to have babies with me," she accused. Sebastian groaned. He leveled up with her, so that now her legs were wrapped around him while he was sitting. He stared down at her from his higher vantage point. "Woman, not once did I say I don't want to have babies with you. You're my mate. Of course I want those things with you. Then why aren't I pregnant? Tell me, Sebastian." Her husband's head dipped. He immersed himself in her neck, rubbing his nose upon it with great apology and apprehension. "I have been concerned," he finally admitted. Mercy sighed, pulling his face away from its hiding place on her skin. "Listen, you can't keep doing this anymore. I know you're worried to have a risky pregnancy like your mom, but her and are two different people." Sebastian nodded slowly. Mercy kissed his cheeks. "Besides, no matter what happens, I always have you." Then, she gave him one of her puppy looks. "And I really want a baby." Sebastian exhaled, one of resignation, as though he were forcing himself to let go of all the worries and stresses that clouded his mind. With their positioning, her scout silk dress had risen up, making it all the more easier for Sebastian to slip his hands underneath. "Very well. If a baby is what my mate wants." His eyes dark, and as he pulled the dress higher, revealing more and more of her smooth skin, they trailed over her as though he were reveling in a masterpiece. "Then a baby is what you will get." His lips connected with hers, fierce and demanding. She felt his aura grow as his tongue swept inside, felt his eagerness to partake of her. Since their first time together, it always felt as though Sebastian were encasing her with all that he was. He never grew tired of displaying just how much he loved her. The extra one, fluffy love. "Oh great, look at her, just like her mother," Sebastian grumbled, staring at his 6-year-old daughter in deep dismay as she clung to the older child. Beside him, his wife was laughing. Mercy felt her daughter really was like herself once she picked the boy. She stuck to him like a leech. "She's so cute." Then, deciding to address the situation before Sebastian did something drastic, she called out to her, "Milania, why are you bothering poor Luke?" "But Mummy," the little girl wailed, still clutching the young boy with all her might. Her wavy hair was in disarray from all the exertion to stay attached to him. "He said he doesn't want to play with me." Luke, though only 8 years old, sighed with a wisdom that preceded his age. He continued to try to pluck off the little girl gently. "Myla, I told you we'll play later. You can't join us now because it's boys only. You joined last time and got hurt. I don't want you to cry again." No, she cried, refusing to let go. Sebastian rubbed his temples. The idea of his little girl infatuated at only 6 was enough to make him irate. What would it be like when she was older? How many men would he have to scare away? At least she favored Luke, who was a good kid in his eyes. Within seconds he snatched his daughter off and placed her over his shoulders. The little girl pulled her daddy's hair in displeasure. "Put me back down." Sebastian ignored her and gestured Luke with a tilt of his head in the direction of the other boys. "You can go ahead, Luke." Immediately he ran to join the others, a wide smile on his face. Marcy knew that would only be the first of Sebastian intervening with the kind of daughter they had in their hands. At 11 years old, Milania grew concerned she wasn't cool enough to hang out with Luke anymore. He had so many friends he could barely hang out with her now. They did cool things, like jump off high distances into the lake nearby. They even got to play with the dirt bikes. "It's okay, sweetie. Daddy gives you permission to treat all boys like their dogs with cooties," her father said, typing away in his study. Milania gave him a look. "Daddy, cooties don't exist," she groused. She then turned to her mother for what to do, as she always had the best advice. Marcy put a finger on her chin. "Well, how about this full week you help me and Grandma with the gardening instead of hanging out with Luke?" Milania frowned, not liking the prospect of losing time with her crush. Why would I do that? She wanted to spend more time with Luke, not less. "I'll tell you a secret. If you leave boys alone for a little bit, they start to miss you more." Her eyes shined. "To my agent 𝐋𝐮𝐬𝐬, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing enthusiasm." Her mother kissed her forehead. "It's worth a try." And so it was. For the next 7 days Milania followed her mother and grandmother into the flower fields and helped Aunt Kristen with some herbs. It was quite wonderful, as the flowers gave an amazing fragrance, and she was able to learn a few things about healing. Once next week crawled around, she would have totally forgotten about going back to spending time with Luke, except as she was reaching her room she found him at the door. "Lip, what are you doing here?" She was surprised. He never came to her door before. It made her really happy. Luke opened his arms wide. "Come, princess. I missed you." Milania ran to him and hugged him with all her might. Her mother was right. Boys miss you when you leave them alone. She would do it more now. That way Luke would come to her door more often. At 16 years old Milania felt true jealousy for the first time. Luke was talking to a really pretty girl. An older girl with nice hair and nice eyes. But most importantly a nice body. Milania really wanted one of those. Her body was a little slow to grow into her curves. She looked nothing like her mother had at her age. What was wrong with her? "Is she going to be your girl, friend?" Milania confronted him, crossing her arms in frustration. Any minute now she would blow up. Luke was hers first. Why did 𝐾𝐥𝐤 now start to notice him? It must be because he was bigger now. He had filled out rather nicely and was one of the tallest one and very strong too. With muscles Milania wanted to touch. Dad said it was inappropriate to touch a man like that though. He said to stay away. Mom said she could hug and kiss on the cheek. Those were safe. "Myla, why are you angry?" He ruffled her hair as if she were a little kid, which she was not. Soon she would be a grown woman. Emily needs help with her defense. In helping her so she gets stronger. Luke explained. Milania didn't feel better though. She's seen the way Emily looks at him. She sometimes trips on purpose so that he catches her, and it works every time. One time she tripped and kissed him on the lips ever so lightly. That 𝐶-Wolf was horrible. But thankfully after that Luke never let it happen again. Even pretended it didn't happen when she pulled away from him with a sneaky smile. Luke never had a girl friend before, and thus that was his first kiss. It made Milania very angry that this girl stole that from her. But Luke said it didn't count because it has to come both ways. So by his definition she wanted to be his first kiss and that he be hers. I still don't like her, Milania expressed, her face still sour. You have no choice in this. I will help her, he said sternly. Milania pouted. That was so like him. Helping people all the time. She much preferred it when he helped the boys, not the girls. The girls flirted too much with him. Viewing her pout, Luke kissed her cheek and nuzzled her neck. Go to your training, Milania. I'll see you later. She snapped. She heard his soft laughter behind her as she stomped away in a huff. At 18 years old, Milania understood that women had amazing superpowers, and it had nothing to do with physical strength. She would use these powers against Luke, as after her 18th birthday, 𝐻𝐸's been acting different. Before, he used to ruffle her hair and crack jokes with her. They would watch funny movies in her television and do homework together. But he was no longer in high school. He was a sophomore college student, and so he was busy doing most things at the campus. Milania was disappointed he didn't hang out with her as much. She had even tried to stay away from him for a week, but it didn't work. He was at her door. She would use her superpower this time. Luke, she said through the phone, feigning sadness. I need some help. Immediately he stood to attention, his voice urgent. Maya, what's wrong? Are you hurt? Do you need me to come get you from somewhere? She heard him go to a quieter place in order to hear her better. Milania had to stop herself from sounding elated. She loved it when he got all distressed and worried over her. It was very pleasing, to say the least. I'm not physically hurt. She heaved a sigh of desolation, one of great grief. Hopefully he got it. Can you please come home? I'm in my room and I can only explain this to you in person. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐸 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. He'll be right there, he promised. She could hear the concern that laced his voice. He would be leaving the campus right now and get there in no more than 20 minutes. They gave their farewells and hung up. Once she hit the red button, Milania smiled mischievously. Her mother said sometimes men need a little scare to see what they may lose. Just a little bump in the right direction. Today, she would be doing just that. She sat in the middle of the bed, wearing some nice shorts and a sweetheart neckline blouse. On her neck hung a beautiful necklace Luke bought for her birthday not too long ago. It was of two intertwined hearts. He evaded her questions when she asked what it meant, and quickly turned it to another topic. Every year he never failed to get her something. He really was a wonderful man, always so attentive to the days that mattered to her. Her dad even said he was good. So that must be true. As promised, Luke arrived. He knocked on her door. Something 2 years ago he would have never done, but he did so now. Come in, Milania called, morphing her features into one of distress. Her lips had a fresh layer of chapstick and her hair was brushed with no tangles. She made it fall effortlessly to one side so that it exposed a side of her neck. Luke burst into her room and closed the door behind him, his eyebrows tugged together with worry as he sat near her at the edge of her bed. What's wrong, Mila? Immediately she flowed into her role. This is the first time it's ever happened before, so I don't know what to do. A man in our pack wrote a love letter to me a month ago. It was a lovely letter, but I didn't know who it was from. Milania saw how Luke's eyes went from worry to a hard look. She had to try really hard to keep from smiling, because she barely started and her superpowers were already working. Go on. His voice lowering to a click tone. I thought that would be the end of it, but then a week later he sent me another one. Then another the week following after. So last Friday I determined to find out who it was. He left it every Saturday taped outside my window, so I prepared to catch him. To my agent extraordinaire, 𝐊𝐸 heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. When I saw him I froze up. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't confront him and let him go. He still believes no one saw him, that I still don't know who he is. Today I caught him looking at me during lunch. Should I wait for him to confess himself or should I go to him myself to speed things up? I don't want to mess this up. She stressed, appearing to be at complete loss of what to do. Luke's lips fell to a straight line. She noticed how he gripped her bed cover tightly, causing his arms to flex ever so nicely. "Do you like this guy?" It sounded more like a threat. Milania shrugged. "Good, naturally. He sounded sweet from his letters. But I think I should get to know him better. Do you agree now?" Milania's mouth popped open and he continued. "I don't want to see you going anywhere near him." "Who is the Werewolf?" he interrogated. Milania touched his bicep. "It doesn't matter who he is. Why shouldn't I go up to him? Are you saying he should make the first move?" Perhaps she was having way too much fun easing him, but this felt exhilarating. She loved the flame in his eyes and the depth to his tone. Luke pulled her arm, drawing her closer. He was growing irritated. "Myla, tell me his name. I want to know who this Werewolf is that leaves foolish letters outside your window." Milania peered at him through her lashes, almost losing herself in admiration of his handsome features. She pouted. "The letters are sweet, not foolish," she defended. "I can write you better letters than he ever could." Milania appeared aghast. "And why is that?" His hand rose to the necklace she wore, brushing against the skin of her chest. "Because I'm the one who loves you, not him." "Yes," she cried, losing her cover altogether and pulling him deeper into her bed. Luke gazed at her hugging form astounded. Did Milania just play him? Only minutes ago she was distressed over a Werewolf who sent her letters. Milania gave him a deepy smile. Finally, he admitted it. His eyes narrowed to slits, but she didn't care. The Werewolf loved her, and that's all that mattered. "Get off. I am so mad at you. There's no guy sending you letters, is there?" He began to push her away. Good thing Milania was an expert in holding on in tight grips. She had this practice since over 10 years of them playing together. "OCM on. Don't be so mad. We're in love," she celebrated. Milania let go of him and plopped on her bed with a wistful sigh. Luke was ready to hop off her bed and give hop off her bed and get her a good scolding, except when she put her arms behind her neck like that her shirt rose and it was showing her smooth, flat stomach. He liked it. 𝐶𝐿 𝐷𝐿𝐻𝐬 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Luke blushed. The woman smirked. Time for her second superpower. "Do you forgive me?" Luke grunted, forcing his eyes away from her abdomen. Milania sat up again and leaned into him, making the collar of her shirt fall just so it happens to give him a nice view of her breasts. 2 years did wonders for her, and she was plump in the right places. Luke had no idea the number of women that eyed her when he went away for classes. Had it not been for her intimidating father, they would have no doubt flirted with her so. "Is that a yes?" Luke gulped, his cheeks turning redder as his eyes betrayed him by lowering to see her heaving chest. With the necklace he bought her pointing right in the middle, it was making things difficult. He couldn't do something rash and make Alpha regret allowing him so close to his daughter. He was the only one with that privilege. The others were brusquely turned away. Milania," he said nervously. He looked away to his left. "To my agent extraordinaire, Madeleine Nilban. Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm," she said innocently, sitting up straight to not torture him any longer. At least he knew well and good she was no longer a little girl to coddle. She was a woman who wanted him. He cleared his throat. "Oh, nothing. I forgive you. Just please promise to never wear this shirt outside your room." Milania rolled her eyes. "This shirt is cute. Why would I not?" Taking note of her new posture, Luke drew a sigh of relief and met her eyes again. "Because, depending on your position, I can see certain things that I don't want any other woman to see it. Will you comply or not?" He returned to his previous stern voice. Milania liked talking to his father better sometimes. He was much more fun and easygoing. His mother was a little more serious. Maybe that's where he got it from. Deciding to not rile him any further, she bobbed her head in compliance. Luke smiled, seeming pleased with her easy agreement. Then, to her surprise, she felt hands on her waist and a kiss to her lips. Their first one. It was soft and loving, and Milania was more than happy to comply in this. She immediately opened her lips and their tongues danced as though they knew each other all along. He pulled her closer, hugging her with deep affection and peppered her with kisses all over her face. He dove to her lips again, taking his time as he explored her. She felt his hands trail up and down her sides, as though relishing the feel of her in his arms. When he pulled away, his eyes were shining. "I really do love you, Myla. I was waiting for the right time." She nuzzled his neck with great reprieve. Her superpowers had worked. "I love you too," she expressed, and their foreheads joined together with two warm, hearted smiles. Extra to Sugar Daddy. Lydia folded her clothing to the suitcase, careful as she placed each item in its proper spot. Jeans on the right, shirts on the left, nightwear in the deep center, and her additional clothing over the rest. The intimates she zipped up in the see-through compartment of the fold. She didn't comprehend how the girls in her college managed to fill more than 4 suitcases up with clothes. Having only filled 2, it was more than enough space for Lydia. Then again, she was particularly packing for frequent late night parties and weekend events. Her clothes were for the purpose of college, getting to class and obtaining her degree. She much preferred spending her late nights studying in the library than out drinking her inhibitions away. She had to focus if she wanted to accomplish getting a master's in business administration in record speed. "I can't believe you and Mike have been separated this whole time. Why didn't you tell me?" Massey exclaimed, watching her with awed eyes as she continued to methodically organize her things. 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻 𝐊𝐢𝐳𝐻𝐿, heartfelt thanks for your unfailing patience, enthusiasm. Lydia should have known better than to let have in from her sister of the break up the moment she made the decision. Lydia shrugged. "I didn't think it was that important. Him and I still talk. We're friends. It's just I didn't think it worth continuing if in the end I want to live in the city, and he wants to stay here." Lydia cowled and stopped her tone from changing at the last word. The truth was, after spending 2 semesters at the college in the city, she knew right away it's where she belonged. Suburban towns like Dark Falls didn't suit her. She much preferred the hustle and bustle of the city. Micah was the complete opposite. His entire life plan consisted of staying here and working under his family business connected to the diner. Who was she to stop him from that? "But why didn't you tell me?" Massey continued. Then, she started crying as though it were the most heinous crime ever. Her eyes became watery as big. Fat tears rolled down her cheeks. Lydia grabbed her prepped box of tissues and brought it to her sister. "I didn't think you would be much of a crier during pregnancy." Massey readily took the tissues and wiped her nose. "I can't help it. I'm so sensitive and I don't understand why." The violet in her eyes became brighter in hue. Within seconds she recomposed herself again and giggled. "Well, if you guys have been separated for 6 months and I didn't know it, I guess you guys are taking it well." The bed dipped as Lydia sat beside her sister. She rested her hand over her enlarged stomach. "We are. I'm glad for the relationship we had, but we both understand we're not compatible in terms of what we want out of life." Massey nodded in understanding. "That makes sense, I guess. I thought you'd be like Sebastian. I should have known you were serious about living out on your own in the city." Lydia winced. "Yeah, about that. City life is not as easy as I pictured in my head. I love it, but sharing an apartment with 2 other girls hasn't been smooth." A sigh of frustration escaped her lips at the thought of her roommates. They were everything she was loud, rambunctious, and complete party girls. It's her saving grace that neither of them ever thought to make a party in their apartment, the space being too small. Rather, they were often invited into record parties on a continual basis. "Don't worry, LYD. Once you get an internship and start getting paid, I know for a fact you'll be able to afford your own place. I know how you like to be a lone wolf. It's only a matter of time." Lydia raised a brow at her sister's terminology. She might as well be a she-wolf as far as Lydia was concerned. "Remember how I told you I sent out over 30 applications? They all waitlisted me because they prefer some kind of prior experience, which I obviously don't have." She huffed, crossing her arms. It boggled her mind that she would be on a list with over 100 other people for a single spot. And how can she get experience if no one takes her? Did they ever think of that? If you want, I can contact a friend. 𝐻𝐤's actually in town this week if you want me to set you up. He works for… I don't remember. Genetics, I think. Lydia's mouth dropped. You have a friend that works in genetics. You have a friend that works in genetics and you never told me. Lydia held on to her sister's shoulders. She felt like fainting. That was the internship to get. It was so high up there that only seniors could apply for internships. Not mere sophomores like her. The prerequisites for getting in were off the chart. Genetics was not a place to only aim for an internship, but a straight-up, legit career. And even those who partook of the internship were not guaranteed a spot there. Only experience. Most people who got in had years of experience stacked in for a permanent position. I'll have him come over tomorrow, Mercy said, smiling good naturally. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Lydia crushed her into a hug. At least, as far as she could go with that bump in the way. It always amazed Lydia the kind of connections Mercy could get. She always envied that of her sister. The way she made friends with people so easily. It came so naturally to her. Yet despite the sheer DNA that Jean totally skipped over her and stayed with Mercy. Even so, the grin on her face could not be swayed. If things worked out, she would get her ideal internship. Honey, can you please take out the trash? Her mother yelled this from across the kitchen, her booming voice traveling through the entire home. Beside Lydia, her father munched on a fistful of popcorn. His shirt was layered with a nice amount of remnants that didn't make it to his mouth. Hey, sweetie, can you take out the trash for me? He pled, eyes glued to the game on the screen as though it somehow held his lifeline. Lydia rolled her eyes, already closing her book as she expected him to delegate the job to her. It was always like this when it was game night. After spending the day with her yesterday, Mercy had left, promising her friend would pass to talk to her. It seemed that friend of hers could not be depended on. That he didn't come at all. Whatever. She doubted a general employee could do anything for her anyway. Internships were managed by another committee, so a recommendation probably wouldn't do much. It was fun to have hope while it lasted. Oh, sweetie. Not in that dress. Her mother berated at seeing her lift the bag from the garbage can. Lydia blinked, and moved by her mother's fussing. It was some expensive dress Mercy had gifted her 2 years ago. Indeed, it was good quality, but Lydia was not concerned. I know how to take the trash out, Mom. Her mother seemed unsure. Be careful. She kept talking about some object that was in the bag. But by then Lydia was already at the door. As she walked down the pavement, she took time to admire the weather. The summertime sun was doing great things. Despite it being 5 past noon, the light was as bright as it was in its peak. Lydia dropped the bag into the bin. However, it appeared there were too many things placed, for Lydia had to bear down on the bag to make it fit. 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻 𝐷𝐞𝐝 𝐊𝐢𝐧𝐼𝐻. She cried. Lydia quickly pulled back her finger, frowning as bright flow of red liquid coursed down her index finger. Crap. That's probably what her mother had been trying to warn her about glass. Lydia cursed. It was the most minuscule cuts that hurt most when she had to clean them. How unexpected. Foul language coming from such a beautiful girl. Lydia's back straightened at the smooth, velvety voice. She glared at the stranger, surprised she hadn't noticed him on her block. That did tend to happen to her, as at times she was so focused on a task she had tunnel vision. How about you go on your merry way and minding your own business? She snapped. Rather than recoil from her words, the stranger smiled. The magnetic type that most girls would squeal under the presence of. For she did have to hand him that he was indeed handsome. He walked up to her, but with his mannerisms it seemed more a glide. Smooth and effortless. Why so serious? Lydia inwardly fumed. Still, she restrained herself. She didn't know this man. There was no point in starting an argument over something so minuscule. Whatever. Her steps faltered as she tried to go around him. It felt as though whichever direction she took to go back home, he managed to get in the way. Without moving. What the heck? Her nose flared. This man was making it increasingly difficult to stay cordial. Do you mind? 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐸 𝐷𝐐𝐿𝐻𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐸. The stranger lifted her hand, the injured one, and brought it before his eyes. Blue, Lydia realized. His eyes were a vibrant blue that reminded her of gleaming sapphire stones. You should clean this up, he advised. His eyes followed the trail of her blood down to her hand. Lydia tried to pull her hand back. If anything, the efforts worked to get her closer to him rather than further away. She had to crane her neck to send him one of her withering looks. He was so tall it was annoying. If you let go of me, maybe I could be more productive in doing that, you freak. The man chuckled, as though amused by her words. Wow, she really was kidding when she said you were serious. His nose lowered to her hand, smelling it. It excites me. Lydia gasped as his eyes seemed to swirl to an even brighter blue. He lowered his lips over her finger, licking the entire trail of blood all the way to its source, where he sucked momentarily before pulling back and smirking. Just my type. Lydia was mortified, almost speechless at his actions. Then, her anger seeped in. She lashed out at him in a thunder. How dare you? Who the hell do you think you are? He cocked his head to the side, surveying her from head to toe, then back again. Feel free to call me sugar daddy. The more she spoke to him, the worse it seemed to get. This man made no sense. 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐸 Heartfelt thanks for your unfailing 𝐊𝐤𝐳𝐴𝐺𝐻𝐸. Lydia squeaked, aghast at his audacity, the sheer nerve of this man. Sugar daddy. In all her life she had never met a man like this. I don't know what kind of ward you belong to, but get the hell away from me. Lydia shoved him back. The stranger barely moved an inch, unaffected by her measly strength. Destiny must be pulling us together, Cherry Pop. For in case you're unaware, you're wearing a dress I bought. Massey said you also wanted your own apartment, so I got you a suite in one of my complexes. It's conveniently not far from your internship. He smiled like a sly fox, taking out his card for her to take. Welcome to Genetics Enterprises. As of next week, you're my intern secretary. Lydia felt her heart accelerate out her chest. Her eyes scanned through the card, her pulse becoming more rapid the more she read. This man was just an employee. He was the executive. Lydia was about to faint. Did Marcy realize the kind of man she was friends with? Why, you're my new boss. His finger slid down her cheek, taking her in appreciatively, yes. But as for you, you can call me sugar daddy.